All good things must unfortunately come to an end, and with Halo Reach's final mission, so too did Bungie's time with Halo. They began the series with a mission named the Pillar of Autumn in Halo Combat Evolved back in 2001, and 9 years later they signed off with a level sharing that very name, with the former connecting to the latter to bring the franchise full circle. Aside from Lone Wolf, which I'd describe more as a playable epilogue rather than a fully fledged mission, it was Bungie's final flourish, a last hurrah before they moved on to pastures new, and I reckon that gives us more than enough reason to have a good look-see at it. For those of you who haven't played Reach in a while, here's a quick recap to get you up to speed. The game begins with Noble 6 joining a squad of 5 other Spartans, known as Noble Team, to investigate a communications disturbance on the planet of Reach, which turns out to be a precursor for an invasion by humanity's enemy, the Covenant. After helping to defend the secretive facility Sword Base and linking up with Dr. Catherine Halsey, Halsey reveals that the Covenant are searching for highly valuable data stored there, and soon after, Noble 6 and squadmate June also encounter a huge invasion force preparing to attack the planet. Deciding to take the fight to their enemy, the UNSC launches a counter-offensive, which begins promisingly enough, until suddenly a Covenant supercarrier arrives on the scene and destroys the UNSC Grafton in the skies above. Noble 6 and George manage to destroy the enormous ship not long after, although George is killed in the process, but it ends up being for naught as an entire fleet appears in its stead. As the Covenant's attack on Reach continues to intensify, Noble 6 travels to the city of New Alexandria to help fight off the enemy and rescue as many civilians as possible, before eventually meeting back up with Noble Team. After destroying a set of communications jammers as the city burns, the team loses another member as Kat is assassinated by a Covenant sniper, and they're left with little choice but to return to Sword Base to destroy the doomed facility. However, before they do, Halsey asks the team to help her decrypt and retrieve data stored in a cavern housing a Forerunner ship nearby, as well as a new AI named Cortana, after which June escorts Halsey off-world, while the remaining members of Noble Team journey to a dockyard housing the ship the Pillar of Autumn to pass both the data and Cortana along to its captain Jacob Keyes, which is precisely where we'll join the action. The Pillar of Autumn opens with Noble 6 and Emil heading towards the dockyard in a Pelican piloted by Carter, with the Covenant in hot pursuit. As flames erupt from the heavily damaged ship, Carter orders the pair to evacuate and continue their mission on foot, while he provides a distraction.
Not sure how long she's gonna stay together. Skies are jammed up anyway. Gotta get you off her, Lieutenant.
Sir,
You don't want to hear it. Get the package to the Autumn.
Done.
Not yet, it's not. Emil, go with him. It's a ground game now.
It's been an honor, sir.
Likewise. I'll do what I can to draw their fire. 6. That AI chose you. She made the right choice.
Soon after taking control of Noble 6, Carter passes overhead, conveniently flying towards the Pillar of Autumn to draw your attention to exactly where you need to be heading, and as the soundtrack transitions to a more somber melody, you get your first indication of how well music is used during the mission. As you're likely well aware by this point, there's absolutely no chance of winning the wider conflict happening across Reach, and another member of Noble Team has seemingly just bitten the dust, so the sudden switch from the pulse-pounding track used during the opening to this much more subdued number is incredibly fitting. There's no huge deviation from the Halo formula during these opening stages in your encounter with the Covenant, but the soundtrack without doubt helps make cutting through the enemy feel like a more futile affair than it so often does. Another great example of this follows swiftly after, as you arrive at a pair of mongooses. At this point, a layer of percussion is added to the music to maintain the tone while adding urgency to perfectly match the vehicle section which follows. By this point in the series, it's pretty much customary that each game's final mission features a vehicle run of some description. In Combat Evolves the More and 3's Halo, you got behind the wheel of a Warthog to conclude proceedings, while here in the Pillar of Autumn, Bungie throws one in a little earlier than usual as you race towards your destination. It's an entertaining spectacle to be sure as you weave between multiple scarabs, but also a brief one, and I would have liked there to have been a bit more to it given this is Reach's final mission. I'm not asking for anything like the other two examples I just referenced. It wouldn't make sense sense for you to be racing against the clock or trying to dodge falling wreckage, but what's included here is pure cinema. You really don't have to think at all about what you're doing, and there's little chance of you messing things up. And while that does give you the opportunity to really take in what's happening around you, it also means that the section as a whole isn't a particularly deep one. Finding yourself back on foot, another fairly standard encounter with a squad of Covenant and a Wraith ensues, before Carter's true fate is revealed.
We can get past this, sir.
No, you can't. Not without help.
Commander, you don't have the firepower.
I've got the mask.
Solid copy. Hit 'em on, boss.
You're on your own, Noble. Carter out.
This is a very appropriate demise for Carter. He's the leader of Noble Team, and he ends up going down with his ship. And if you dig a little deeper, you'll find there's a certain sense of irony in the way each squad member dies. And before I elaborate further, I also want to admit that I didn't spot this myself until a few commenters pointed it out to me and I investigated further. Perhaps sometimes I'm less observant than I like to think I am. George is the first member of Noble Team to die. A demolitions expert who had been quoted as saying he'd never leave Reach, he was killed by an explosion in space above the planet. Kat was a whiz with technology and was shot dead due to a shield malfunction caused by the Covenant's glassing of Reach. June was a sniper used on reconnaissance and stealth missions, and he disappeared alongside Dr. Halsey, his fate left unclear. As previously mentioned, Carter is the leader who goes down with his ship, and he's soon followed by close quarters combat expert Emil, who is killed by an elite wielding a sword. And finally, Carter requests that Noble 6 leave all that lone wolf stuff behind at the beginning of the game, and yet by the end of the story, 6 has little choice but to die alone, as he finds himself the sole survivor of Noble Team, facing insurmountable odds. Although that being said, while he plays the lone wolf, he's really being a team player as he does it to help humanity, which makes for a lovely arc to his character. It's a really impressively executed idea by Bungie, and to this day I still kick myself that I never managed to notice it. Moving on, a brief foray further into the mountains and a fight against a pack of drones is followed by one of my favourite encounters in the game. As a gigantic shipyard comes into view, Keyes contacts 6 to let him know he's waiting.
This is Captain Keyes of the Pillar of Autumn. We are tracking you, Noble, and we've begun our launch sequence. Proceed to dry dock, platform D. I'll be on it myself to receive the package.
And what follows is a wonderful layered battle which really shows off the best of Halo. The soundtrack swells and you take on an extraordinary amount of Covenant, first on the ground, then in short-range combat, as you blast your way through a pair of enormous buildings you can choose to attack from any direction or height you see fit. It feels suitably epic, and in my view it's Halo doing what Halo does best, surrounding you with enemies and allies in an enormous sandbox packed to the brim with opportunities to cater combat to exactly the playstyle you see fit. And there's a pair of hunters near the end to round it off, which means by the time you've reached this point, you'll have fought every single enemy type featured in the game in a single mission as well. It's not the Pillar of Autumn's final encounter, however, and you still have some ways to go before your objective is complete. After dispatching one more group of Covenant, you'll finally find yourself within touching distance of your destination, although there's still plenty of work clearing a landing zone still to be done before Keyes can safely join you. Like some of the encounters at the front end of the Pillar of Autumn, there's nothing too interesting to write home about during this segment, although it is always a treat to find a sniper rifle waiting for you atop a vantage point. The most defining feature is by far the area's skybox, which really brings home just how desperate the Covenant are to stop you. It's something Reach does really well for the duration of its campaign, and here is no exception. After several waves of enemies have been destroyed, Keyes and 6 finally meet face to face, and Emil is killed by a rather familiar looking elite, with 6 volunteering to play the lone wolf a final time so that Keyes can return to the Autumn unobstructed.
Lieutenant, get aboard! We gotta get the hell out of here!
Negative. I have the gun. Good luck, sir.
Good luck to you, Spartan.
Some of you might think this next part is a bit of a stretch, and I'm by no means saying it's intentional, but I've always personally liked to think of this scene as something of a metaphor for Bungie ending its time with the franchise. There was always going to be more Halo. Indeed, the game ends with another adventure soon to begin, even if it's a tale that has already been told. But for Bungie, it was time to pass the torch, or weird canister thing containing an AI, to another studio, while their time with the series, like 6's, comes to an end. As mentioned, at this point 6's fate is all but sealed, and if you've played the game before, you'll no doubt be mentally preparing for Lone Wolf, the playable epilogue which follows shortly after. However, there's a brief sequence before the mission concludes which at least ends the Pillar of Autumn on a high, and it's one I've always thought of as the get your own back section. First, you have to get past more Covenant, which doesn't seem overly exciting, except once you've nearly cleared them all out, you'll come across the elite who took down Emil. You may have already recognised this particular elite during Emil's death scene, but hopefully once he's right in front of you, you'll recognise him regardless, and realise you've met him once or twice before. The first was when he ambushed you during Winter Contingency before fleeing, and the second was when he sniped Cat with his needle rifle. And now, after he's been a thorn in your side for pretty much the entire game, you get a moment of catharsis as you're finally given the chance to enact sweet, sweet revenge, which is then followed by a second opportunity to do so, as you then take control of the mash driver yourself to blow as many Covenant ships to smithereens as you can manage. And with that, Six has finally completed his mission as the Pillar of Autumn departs and he's left alone, surveying what's left of the doomed planet. The scene which follows leads directly into the start of Halo Combat Evolved, and while I know some of you will have issues in terms of story consistency after Reach seemingly takes a few liberties with the details, I have to say that I'm a big fan of the Pillar of Autumn. In terms of the different sections which comprise it, it can be a bit up and down, with excellent encounters often followed by others that are decidedly weaker, but throughout all of it the soundtrack is used incredibly well and the mission's atmosphere as a whole is top notch. Add to that a wealth of engaging story beats from beginning to end, and the way it is so wonderfully connected to the events of Combat Evolved, and it's a level that may not be my favourite in Reach, but is without doubt a fitting end to Bungie's incredible, amazing, genre-defining time with Halo. Thanks for checking out the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you had a good time, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, as I always love hearing from you, and hopefully I'll catch you all again soon.